Hi everyone, super excited to be here today in the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative Brain House studio at the World Economic Forum Annual Meeting 2025. We are excited to be part of the first ever Brain House at the World Economic Forum, which DAC created to explore the connections between brain health and the pressing global issues traditionally covered at the Davos event. I am Christa Studzinski from the Ontario Brain Institute. I'm super excited to be a co-sponsor, or for our organization to co-sponsor the Brain House with the Davos Alzheimer's Collaborative and some of our other partners. We are really trying to make sure that we are improving brain health for everyone across Canada and working with our global partners. And I'm super excited to have Eyre here today from Rice University.
Thanks for having me, Christa.
All right, should we jump in?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. I promised you I would start with my hard question so we could get it out of the way.
Yes.
In your opinion,
yes.
We've known each other and you've known our organization for a while now. In your opinion, in your view, what has been the biggest contribution of the Ontario Brain Institute to the brain health ecosystem?
Yeah, I believe that the biggest contribution is actioning transdisciplinary innovation in brain health. So you guys at OBI really break the silos down between basic science, clinical science, trials, public health, advocacy, policy, and investing. You break those silos down, you cross-pollinate the types of experts, and you're driving towards a sort of a common goal of improving brain health. And I have, I'm a physician scientist, I'm a business person, a policy person, but on the academic side of my life, I have cited you guys many times in papers explaining this. And so it really is that this sort of alchemy, they call transdisciplinarity, they call also the Medici effect, like the Renaissance, the Medici family that created that Renaissance. That's what I think you guys are really good at and what you've demonstrated to the world that can be done. It's not easy and it's unique what you've done. So how easy is it to translocate and put somewhere else in the world? But anyway, you're a beacon of kind of hope for this kind of silo smashing and alchemy.
Amazing, thank you for that. And this is a follow-up that we hadn't planned, but have you seen other groups doing a really good job of this in your travels?
Interestingly, I think a lot about this. Actually, before I was focused now on the brain economy work, I ended up being the lead editor of a book on transdisciplinarity and neuroscience. So I studied this very deeply, where the book was published with Oxford Press in 2021, with contributing chapters from people all around the world. And, anyway, so I think about this a lot. I'm kind of like a transdisciplinary nerd, or like the Medici kind of effect nerd. The Baycrest organization in Toronto, which is down the road from you guys, they do this very well as well with their, University of Toronto's on campus. They have a school on campus. They have also CABI, and CABI, of course, has a venture fund. I'm actually an advisor to CABI, and so I very much respect Baycrest. So that I'll stop there. That's another example. So all in Canada.
We do like to collaborate, and that's great because we know the Baycrest folks very well, obviously, and we work closely with them. So amazing. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to what we actually planned on talking about.
Yes.
We're here to talk about brain capital, and so maybe we can start with having you sort of talk a little bit about define it for everyone, and maybe talk about some of its earliest origins.
Sure. Yeah. So this brain capital and brain economy movement. Really, the seedling is from Canada. It's from Michael Wilson, who was a former very popular politician. He's now a late person, unfortunately. I never got to meet him, but in 2011 he wrote the sort of seminal idea down that brain capital is brain health plus brain skills for a brain economy. So I just, this work is inspired by Canada, and I've essentially run with Michael Wilson's work and tried to develop a global movement and a disciplines of economics and et cetera. But so what this is about is understanding that the brain must be at the center of the economy. So all of the brain stakeholders that we know must be at the center of the way that we drive the economy. Our brains are the seat of our productivity, our creativity, and they're the seat of our socializing as well. And if our brains are succumbing to this multi-trillion-dollar escalating cost of mental and neurological conditions, which afflicts everyone across the lifespan, from autism to Alzheimer's, we are depleting what we call the brain capital of nation states. And so brain capital is of course essential though to the energy transition, the AI transition, building new products and services, patents, and the creativity that we need to solve the world's challenges. So we must go from this brain capital depleting position that we're in every country in the world, which we also can say is brain negative, to brain positive, to building brain capital. And this brain economy is about how do we do that in each sector. This is not just a health issue. Of course, we need more neurologists and psychiatrists in certain areas. This is about industrial innovation. It's also about climate. It's about digital. What's the role of smartphones on our brains, good and bad? And it's about really thinking that stuff through. And then finally, the brain economy work is about, it's not just about government grants or about clinical care, even though those are key. It's also about what is the role of philanthropy, what is the role of big government, and what is the role of the private sector as well, and pharmaceuticals, banking, and other sorts of real estate companies and architecture and design firms. So that's a slightly longer answer, but that's where it came from. And that's a description of it, and then also getting into what I actually spend my days doing now. Yeah.
Amazing. And so what I love about this is a lot of the concepts behind brain capital and brain economy are actually backed by neuroscience. And so we've talked about this before, but the Ontario Brain Institute's original vision was about, in order to understand brain and brain health, you start by studying the diseased brain so that you can then better understand the normal brain, which then helps us get to a point where we can optimize our brains. And I feel like the brain capital and brain economy topics are very sort of coming full circle in that context.
Yeah.
And so it's great to see that come up.
Yes. Well, and your point about the importance of the prefrontal cortex that your founder talked about in solving that in the context of disease, normal function, and expanding human performance.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's extremely helpful to me because, the preserve of the brain economy is like macroeconomics and sort of macro finance, and so I'm always looking for ways to explain it better to neurologists and then Mr. and Mrs. Jones, citizens. So that's very helpful.
And
that
so
we can use
yes,
that.
absolutely. Yeah. And so there's a region of the frontal lobe that is actually responsible for maintaining energization. And my way of explaining it, sort of simplified version, is if you think of driving a car, you've kind of got that sweet spot where if you're going too fast, you're just destroying the engine. And if you're not going fast enough, you're not optimizing the performance of the vehicle. But there's that sweet spot of function. And really there's a region in the frontal lobe that is responsible for doing that in your brain. So it's important as individuals that we take store of that and monitor when we are at that peak performance, but also in a workforce setting, how do we empower our employees and our organizations to make sure that our people are optimized.
And we are, I love it. Thanks for sharing.
So we are getting so let's do our quick close up. And so, circling back to some of the conversation we've been having about the origins of brain capital really starting in Canada, and some of our history, our original vision at the Ontario Brain Institute. What's really exciting to hear is that this year, the G7 is actually coming back to Canada. And so this creates a really great opportunity for us to really sort of take ownership of that concept of brain capital and say, hey, we started it here, it's turning into a global movement. How do we make sure that it becomes a reality? Because we need to be taking care of our brains. We only have one.
So I think that we have a historic opportunity this year with G7 Canada, and so I consider me the wingman to Canada to try to get us into the head of state or the finance minister or the health minister's meeting. This is a historic opportunity, Christa, because the brain economy has made it into the formal agenda of the World Economic Forum. We have a session on Thursday, 23rd of January. So we are no longer in the side events, we are in the main event, and so we need to be in the main event of G7 Canada. And what we're thinking right now is that the role of the brain economy in boosting economic productivity is probably the best narrative and set of projects that we can develop for the G7. Productivity is flagging in all G7 countries except the US, which technically still has weak productivity. So what can the brain economy do to unlock productivity? How can it reduce the cost of clinical care, keep people out of hospital, but then also how can the brain economy help us to keep our entrepreneurs that develop businesses mentally healthy? They're really on the borderline of exhaustion all the time. And how can we potentially boost creativity and boost productivity for average people, like myself? So that's the narrative that we're taking to G7 Canada, and very keen to work with OBI and then Canada-wide stakeholders like Baycrest, the Canadian Brain Research Strategy, University of Calgary, and so please join us in this. We must get into like the finance minister's track, for example, and really think about how do we scale up investment in the brain economy to make that transition. So anyway, that's why I'm excited to bring this full circle back to Canada this year.
It's very exciting, and said slightly differently, we need to come together as partners in the ecosystem to really speak with a united voice, because that's the only way we're going to have meaningful impacts and make some changes. So Harris, thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Awesome.
Super excited to be here in Davos with you, and look forward to many more brain houses and many more great conversations.
Yes, wonderful. Thanks, Christa.
Changes.
Great to be with you.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Thank you.